Everyone who's on the right coast. I'm Sam. I'm the founder and CEO. Really pleased to have you here today. I guess good morning to those of you on the left coast or Mountain Time. Um, uh, as the founder and CEO of Grant Engine, really pleased to bring you this important content and have my esteemed colleague, Dr. Madhav Sankuni, join this afternoon for you. Um, Great content here and really exciting that we've got a read, and we played some instrumental role in helping get the SBIR program reauthorized early. We're part of you and the whole ecosystem to make that happen, and want to bring you the details about higher budget limits, um, improved disclosure for foreign risk assessment, and a host of other things that we'll talk about. Um, and we will be recording the session and also sending the slides out. So you will get those, and we will have plenty of time for Q&A on the chat. So if you have a question live, please pose it in the chat. We'll be answering those as we go, and then leave time for questions at the end. A couple of administrative items. The World Cup is also going on right now, so pleased that you're joining us here. We'll do score updates as we go, just for all of you England and/or Congo fans. You'll get the real-time update, so you're not lost out on what's going on in the World Cup. So with that, let's get rolling. We could jump to the next slide, Meta. We're going to talk about funding updates and just a landscape view as to what's going on in the world and how that those dynamics affect you and how we have seen successful action. Jump into the details of SBIR plus one that just got released in the last 24 hours. And then if we have time, talk about Writing to Win and a background on Grant Engine. A couple of quick words on Grant Engine. We are here as a top flight team and organization to save lives, extend the length of a quality life, and to protect our way of life. We do that, of course, by getting you non-dilutive funding from the SBIR program, ARPA-H, life science funding through the CDMRP, broad agency announcements at DoD's for Big Army and other large armed services, Special Operations Command, and a host of other mechanisms. That top line of saving lives is our bottom line. And we have a number of differentiators, the most important of which is our team, but also our process and the intelligence that we've learned over the now decade plus of our work that really converge on two outcomes. The first is that our clients win dramatically more often. Normally, this is 2x to 4x higher than the national average for win rates, but these days, and you'll see some data in a second, it's more like 3x to 5x higher than the national average. So that matters, obviously, to get you funding. The other element is that clients enjoy the experience when they work with us, which is saying something about grant writing. We consistently have customer satisfaction ratings that are in the 90% of our clients are extremely happy, and the remaining 10%, our clients are happy. That is important to us. And a lot of that comes from the team about how they work. We take taking care of our team very seriously. And you can see that objectively in our Glassdoor ratings about how we perform versus other companies just that write grants for themselves and any other routes that you might take. But our team is top flight and we take great care of our team, so they take great care of you. And our Glassdoor ratings are an evidence of that, objectively. Um, there are significant benefits to going after non-dilutive funding. If we could jump to the next slide, the primary one is that um, there is no better ROI of spending a little bit amount of money, and every dollar matters in your company for sure, to secure significant funds. So spend, under $20,000 to have a firm write your grant, and you get $3 million, and that funding is non-dilutive to your cap chart. That spend is not insignificant for sure. But if you have an existing grant, that will pay for it. Um, but what you get out of that is unprecedented. You cannot spend that amount of money on doing anything and get that outcome. And a big reason to work with Grant Engine is because we get funding at a much higher rate. We also spend a lot of time on that approach section, and that effort on the number 4, that it delivers an improved execution on your R&D pipeline. So a lot of our clients are better off just of having that specificity of the logical chain of experiments that equal a milestone met for meeting the endpoints. Of course, the money certainly helps, but that specificity is really effective. The validation of peer review remains the toughest bar to get. Validation of peer review of reviewers that just don't care about your company. So when you get an award through Grant Engine in a differentiated way, that validation is something you can take to investors. It can take a little bit of time. We've got a planning calendar, and Dan, if you can put that planning calendar in the chat, of when that cover page link, of when you get the money. It's not short, but it's as long as it takes to raise equity, in our experience. And once you get one grant, that grant will pay for future effort. So it is a very effective tool to move forward with. And while we're chatting, so you can click on that link to get to that tool access about working your calendar for the forward quarters and years between a fast track and a phase 2. And there's one other useful tool that we will present here in a minute about your readiness. So if you could prep that cover page as well, Dan. On the next slide, talking just as a priming discussion for what Madhav will walk us through, the SBIR bill is funded through September 2031, so a really nice runway. They've added up to $30 million per project 4-year lift of a phase 2B, which is significantly more. It's almost 10 times as much as it used to be. So that's really attractive. We're hearing that will actually be closer to 15 or 10 million in terms of awards, but that's something that's at the agency specific opportunity. So that is significant. The NIH has laid down, if we can, just go all the way through. I think there's 2 more profiles. Agencies have to cap the number of proposals that they will receive. The NIH has done that at 9, including resubs. So that's to address this SBIR mill issue. And that equals you want to submit quality, not quantity. 9 is a relatively small number, although it's plenty. But you want to focus on quality first. That's what gets you awards, which is the name of the game, versus getting submissions, which is the path to just lots of time and lost energy. We're focused on awards, not just submissions. Foreign risk assessment remains a big deal. And that offers a path for a disclosure as to why, if you didn't get an award. But that is more important than ever to maintain. That's part of our process that we integrate all the way through, and we can help you even if you're not a client. Just ask those questions. But you really are best off by being a client to navigate that foreign risk assessment. The next slide, and there's lots of others there that you can reference in the doc. The next slide just speaks to the overall timeline of each of the agencies about when solicitations will be coming out. We're pleased that August 5th is the next available date. for starting a submission for the September 5 deadline. And early matters. We'll talk about why that is as we go. Um, but there are lots of agencies, and all of the ones you see here, plus others that are open to the SBIR program. And Grant Engine has an experienced track record of winning in the life sciences, as well as winning in the defense tech space dual use arena, in the space arena, via NASA and other International Space Station and other areas. You can check out the um, details on our industries section of our webpage. So that's a range of opportunities. On the next slide, we have a profile of 3 columns that speak to other areas outside of the NIH SBIR that are available for you. There's a lot more as well, um, but these areas for life science companies are wide-ranging and provide a lot of funding. SBIR to NIH is not the only place. That is certainly via the omnibus a great horizontal opportunity to go after. Um, and that's something of interest for folks. But there's lots of other places to go for funding as well. Um, we wanted to talk about why September versus waiting until January. And this next slide speaks to one of the main reasons as to why. So this is a fun slide. This is the calendar quarter of when awards happen over the last 6 years. And you can see, if you look at the data, that in the first 6 months of the year, only 13% of the notice of awards happen. And in the first 9 months of the government year, right, that's from October 1st through June 30th, that 9-month period that is now ending, just over a third of all awards happen for the whole year. Okay, so that first 9 months, 3/4 of the year, only just over a third of awards happen. That means that 63% of those awards happen in the third quarter between essentially today and September 30th. That means that if you wait until January to submit, you are still going to get evaluated against the September cohort. So there's no less competition dynamic that happens in January. You're just still going to be evaluated into that total cohort between September and January. So September is a better time for you to submit if you are ready to submit a quality application. The other dynamic about waiting to January, thinking that might be less competitive, is that it's most likely not less competitive because they get evaluated together, September and January submissions. But also, if you submit in January, it's most of the time you don't get a chance to resubmit for the April deadline because that 3-month window from Jan 5 to April 5 is the shortest of all the cycle timing. That means you get to wait until September to do a resub, which is essentially a year away from where if you are ready, you could submit now. So that's for that reason we recommend thinking about September if you're ready and you can put together a quality application. We do still have some capacity for September, so we'd really welcome a call with you if you're interested in that. And one aspect that we invite you to do on your own, or share this tool with your colleagues and friends, is an NIH SBIR funding readiness tool. So Dan, if you don't mind sharing that in the chat. This is a 7-question survey. It's based on intelligence of what we know are highly correlated. We think they're causative, but we haven't proven that yet. We've proven that they're highly correlated to getting a competitive funding score. So you can see that in the chat, or you will as soon as Dan drops it in. And that will take you less than 3 minutes to fill out, and it gives you an assessment with a score and identifies the 3 main gaps for where you are. as to whether or not you are ready or how ready you are to submit a competitive NIH SBIR. Um, Feel free to print that to PDF, share it with us. We're happy to talk about what we can do to help you navigate through that. But that's also just for your own use to just assess your readiness. And we give you a quantitative score out of 100, and that is being precise in an imprecise world. So appreciate everyone's understanding that we can't peg a number, but we wanted to give something quantitative. So that gives you a zone of readiness that sets you up for understanding your gaps and how to close them. So that's a great tool for you to use and also for you to spread that knowledge across um, the the community and ecosystem that we all are a part of. Um, Along those lines, we also have a very robust blog and a very useful SBIR pay lines um, content that we're going to continuously update it. And NIH have said that they're kind of moving away from pay lines, but we also know, they also have said they need some basis for determining win-loss, right? And that pay line still is a benchmark, certainly useful. And that if you just Google SBIR pay line or go to our um, homepage and just hit the search magnifying glass and just type in SBIR pay line, you can get that best in class content for what the pay lines are. That's one of a good web page of many, many, many pieces of content that are available for you. Um, I've got two more slides which say the same message, but at this time I'd like to start. We've got two quick poll questions before I hand it over to Madav. If you could, Dan, put the first poll question out there as this is really around where your company is in the process of going after SBIR. And if we could advance the slide, I'll talk through the landscape and like what readiness really means here. This is a longitudinal chart through 2024, and we'll update on the next slide, 2025. But this chart speaks to how hard is it to get for the average submitter on average, how hard is it to get an award at the NIH SBIR program? And the data is very clear. This is over a long period of time, back to 98, so almost 30 years of data. But the trend lines in a sawtooth fashion, but the trend line nonetheless shows a clear dynamic of it is getting tougher to get an award on average for your average player in the NIH SBIR program and STTR than it ever has been. In 2024, we had the lowest award ratings. That was due to predominantly AI-driven submissions. And if we jump to the next slide, that was only surpassed on win rates in 2025. Okay. By that being the new lowest. And you can see this is about as classic of a supply demand curve as you can possibly get. You see in the bars the demand going up in number of submissions for money. And you can see, well, we know the supply of dollars has gone up only nominally to do some increased appropriations level of about 1% in 2025 to account for which is what was appropriated. And you can see the commensurate reduction in win rates in the line charts over the same time periods for each of the components, and in fancy purple, the total win rate. This speaks to quality as a mandate. And if we can share those results, Dan, of where folks are ready, it looks like we've got 71%, apologies, 79% are either ready, have a phase two in hand, or are looking at bigger funding. That's amazing that 13% of you are looking at potentially 10, 15 plus million dollars through a phase 2B or a CRP. And we've got 65% are ready for the next grant. If you would like our help, there'll be a quick poll, the third poll question that we'll ask towards the end, if you'd like us to weigh in. Um, and then 21% of you are not yet started, or you're just thinking about exploring. Um, Dan, if you would put up the second poll question, this speaks to timing around which cycle you are targeting. And the theme here is what we just mentioned earlier, which is um, if you are ready with a competitive set of data and you're well positioned to submit, doing it in September is better than January. But if you will have a better set of data, you need that time to pursue for January, um, then we would recommend waiting for January. But the theme here is quality, right? That is what will make you stand out. And quality is certainly the science and the data, but it is also grantsmanship. And there's a whole host of approaches and rationale for why we win much more than average and much more than many companies doing it themselves. And we're happy to discuss those in more detail and on a complimentary basis have a discussion with you about your project in a detailed 60 to 90-minute call, which we call a subject matter expert review, that talks candidly about how to position your product and program for success. Maybe we share those results. Dan, almost 80% of the audience here is thinking about September, which is good. There's still time to put together a quality submission there. Um, at this time, I'm really happy to hand it over to Madhav to walk us through the SBIR program itself. Madhav is a wealth of knowledge and he's one of our subject matter experts, also in the management team at Grand Engine. And he is a key member of the team, and our whole team has information about these programs. So when you speak to Madhav and you speak to other members of our team that we'll put in front of you, you're getting depth of expertise that is there for your success. So with that, sir, I'll hand it over to you, and I'll just leave that we're at 22 minutes into the match and Congo has scored, which would not be expected. So it's 1-0, the Democratic Republic of Congo against England. So interesting times as we go live. Over to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Sam. So I just wanted to touch upon the NIH SBIR STTR program to some extent, as well as talk about some of the solicitations that have been released since the reauthorization. Sounds like from the poll results, most of you are quite familiar with these programs. So I'm gonna, go over these pretty quickly. As most of you know, the goal of the SBIR program through the NIH is to stimulate technological innovation. They want to use small businesses as a way to meet some of the research and development needs that the federal agencies tend to have. It also fosters and encourages participation of the small businesses in the technological innovation. So actually translating products that might otherwise be stuck in a research lab all the way into the market and be helpful in saving lives, as Sam sort of alluded to earlier. They also want to increase private sector commercialization of innovation, by providing this non-dilutive funding as your initial round of funding investment into a small business, kind of getting it off the ground and then being able to attract that private sector funding and getting it out into the market. At the NIH, the small business, the SBIR grants get about 3.2% of the total budget that the NIH has. STTRs tend to have about 0.45%. There are some basic differences in terms of what the required partnerships are and the work requirements. So SBIRs, although allow for research partnerships with an academic or lab or a research institution, are not required, whereas through an STTR program, you absolutely have to have a partnership with a nonprofit research institution. The work requirements, define how much work you can outsource from the company to these small, to the sub awards as they're called. So in a phase one, you're allowed to allocate 33% of a phase one budget to a sub award and 50% in the case of phase twos. There's a very different sort of calculation when it comes to HTTRs. 30% has to be done by a primary research institution partner and 40% by the small business. Principal investigators are the folks who are named as the person responsible for the grant, usually from the SBIR grant. That person has to belong to the small business and they need to be primary employment has to be with the small business. Whereas in STTR, it can be from the small business or the partnering research institute. So the way the small business program at the NIH or is set up, there are many phases of development, not to be confused with clinical trial phases because they use sort of the same terminology. A phase one SBIR grant is generally used for to show feasibility or proof of concept for whether it's a drug, device, diagnostic, whatever the case might be. Phase two grants tend to be larger budgets and therefore can be used for optimization, right? So if you have pre-IND, IND enabling studies or IDE enabling studies, or you have, some work that needs to be done prior to going to the FDA to get approval for first in human studies, that's the kind of things that a phase two SBIR grant is likely to fund. There is the mechanism called as a fast track grant. A fast track essentially is a combination of a phase one and a phase two. These have a higher bar in terms of getting funded because you have to be at the right stage and be able to show that your technology is de-risked enough that they give you the money for both the phase one and phase two, at the get-go of it, right? The next type of grant that you can get is a phase 2B strategic breakthrough. This is the one that again Sam referred to a little while back. This is something that was recently set up through the new reauthorization bill. It From the SBA guidelines, the total budget for one of these awards is meant to be about $30 million, but at the NIH, we see varying amounts depending on the institutes that actually are involved with these grants, and we will talk about it in a little bit of time. These generally work as bridge grants, essentially to get you across that valley of death, as people might talk about it. There are also commercialization readiness pilots. These grants are again meant to be later stage grants that are, help you with technical assistance and commercial support, getting your product, through those final stages of approvals required before it is ready to get out into the market. The available solicitations, we have a omnibus solicitation. So an omnibus solicitation is essentially an SBIR or STTR, funding opportunity that takes all comers, whether you are proposing human subject studies or clinical trials, or there are none of those, but essentially fit within the priorities of what the NIH and the institutes at the NIH are trying to get at. And these are what we call investigator initiated grants. So as long as you have a good product and a good idea and you can show the significance and innovation associated with developing those, you probably fit under an SBIR or STTR omnibus. The phase 2Bs and the commercialization readiness pilots are a little bit more late stage grants, and you need to have certain requirements in place before you can apply for those grants. And again, I will talk about those in the next few slides here. So with regards to NIH and the solicitations that NIH have released for the SBIR STTR mechanism, there is one solicitation for clinical trials and non-clinical trial applications. It used to be the case that in the past they used to have multiple solicitations, and you need to make the decision as to whether your particular project had a clinical trial or not, and you would decide which solicitation that you would apply under. In this instance, they have gotten rid of it, and there's the one omnibus solicitation for SBIRs and one omnibus solicitation for STTRs, no matter if you have clinical trials or not. The earliest submission date is August 5th, 2026. So this is when the portal will open and start accepting applications. But the next application due date is September 5th, 2026. This particular solicitation, though, the two omnibus solicitations that have been released are active till August 6th, 2027. So we have 3 cycles: September 5th, Jan 5th, and April 5th, April 5th that we can apply to. There are specific eligibility and registration requirements as part of all of the solicitations released. So eligibility is obviously for these are for-profit companies, they are small businesses, and there are some very specific ownership requirements around, the nationality or citizenship of the owners, as well as the amount, the type of investments that have been received by a particular small business to this stage. There are also some registrations that will be required to be put in place before you can actually apply for these grants, and they're pretty straightforward. They generally take a little bit of time, especially sam.gov. And so, if you are thinking about a September 5th submission, now's the time to actually start getting your registrations in place, because the sam.gov alone can take about 6 weeks sometimes, and you want to get ahead of it so that you're not prohibited from applying because you couldn't get the registrations done on time. There's some specific, requirements around, who the principal investigator can be. There's no real academic background that is expected of these folks, but there are some employment and effort requirements that need to be followed, and most of that information is usually given, is written into these solicitations. And as long as you read those solicitations, you should be able to figure those out. Similarly, the work, whether it is internal to the company or outsourced, there are certain very specific percentages that are expected as well as part of SBIR grants or STTR grants. And you want to make sure that you are, compliant to those as you put the submissions in. So with regards to the NIH, SBIR, STTR omnibus solicitation, one of the big differences that we have seen, let me put it this way, two big differences we have seen. One is that, as I mentioned earlier, that they have one solicitation, whether you have a clinical trial proposal or something, or a proposal that does not have a clinical trial as part of it. The other big change that we have seen is STTR now accepts direct to phase two applications as well. This was not the case in previous instances of the STTR program, and now they have actually changed that to accept direct to phase two applications as well. The budgets and period of performance for a phase one grant. It is, the maximum budget allowable according to the solicitation is $323,000. Now, this varies, considerably depending on the institute that you're applying to, and the solicitation has a very nice table that talks about the limits, the budget limits that various institutions have placed, depending on whether you fit within the priorities of those institutes or not. So some of them go almost all the way up to $700,000. Some of them are more in the $400,000 range. And then some institutes, they stick to this SBA guidelines budget, which is the 323,000 K. Even though in the solicitation they say the max period of performance for a phase one grant is 6 months, we have heard with credible information from the NIH that 1 year grants are also allowable, and this is something that was similar to most previous iterations of the solicitation as well. Phase two grants, similarly, the SBA guidelines limit the budget to 2.15 million. Again, various institutions provide the waiver budget limits for their institutes, and it can go up as high as $3 million. So make sure you read through the solicitations to figure out, based on the institute, your proposal is likely to be picked up by, there might be a different budget limit, and you want to maximize the budget as you put the budget together for any of these proposals. Again, the max, budget years listed in for a phase two is about 2 years, but again, I think 2 to 3 years is generally the period of performance for a phase two grant. With regards to foreign organizations and international collaborations, I think, Sam mentioned about how foreign risk has become a big, point of concern for the SBIR STTR grants. So along those lines, non-US entities or non-US components of US organizations are not eligible to apply for these SBIR STTR grants. Similarly, foreign subawards and subcontracts are definitely not allowed as part of the SBIR STTR programs as well. Someone previously had asked a question in the chat about buying unique equipment from a sole vendor that might be a foreign vendor. That is allowable, except you might want to get prior. It is highly encouraged that you get prior approval from the NIH to do that, right? So if you do not get prior approval, there's a good possibility that they might just not, agree to it once, you go through the JIT process of negotiating the grant itself. So it's best in cases where you might be interested in using a foreign vendor or source that you actually talk to the program officers ahead of time and sort of get the prior approval. Foreign risk assessment is a big part, as as I mentioned earlier. There is significant scrutiny on companies and covered individuals. So if you have an investor who is from a country of considered as of concern by the U.S. State Department, or you have collaborations into a country considered as of concern, there is a high likelihood that you might be negatively tagged for a foreign risk assessment, and therefore your grant could be pulled before it's even funded, right? So these are things that you need to be aware of as you think about putting together some of these SBIR STTR grants. For clinical trials, not all institutes at the NIH actually accept clinical trials through the omnibus solicitation. So it is advised that as you read through the solicitation, you make sure that the institute of interest for you actually accepts it before you decide to put in a clinical trial application. With regards to clinical trials for these applications, there is an NIH decision tool that helps you decide whether and determine if your application is actually falls under the category of human subjects research or a clinical trial, so that you can then make sure that you're putting the additional burden of documents that will be required as part of either the human subjects research or the clinical trial. There is a new requirement for a regulatory plan that needs to be submitted. It's a two-page document. Again, it's the instructions for what needs to be included as part of the regulatory plan is in the solicitation. It's highly, it is advised that everybody read that prior to making these submissions, because there is some very specific information that needs to be included as part of that regulatory plan. Human subject docs are also required if you are, submitting a proposal that involves human subjects research or clinical trials. NIH has a wealth of resources that you can use for different aspects of as you plan your clinical trials, and you have statistical methods that might be used. And we have linked a few here, but make sure that you are actually reading through those, because it's quite helpful to understand what some of the requirements are there as well. Moving along, just wanted to give a quick update on the Phase 2B Strategic Breakthrough Awards as well. This is, as mentioned earlier, it's a new initiative through the recent SBIR reauthorization bill for Phase 2 projects, that require extraordinary time and effort, right? So essentially, you are going from, let's say, having done your lead optimization, and now you have a lot of work that needs to be done with regards to IND enabling studies. Maybe you have to do non-human primates, whatever the case might be. These Phase 2B awards are meant for projects that require that additional, extra time and effort, right? That rather than a standard Phase 2 project. According to the SBA guidelines, it can provide up to $30 million, but as we have seen through the solicitation, most NIH institutes provide a lot less than the 30 million. I think the highest is NCI, which is about 15 million. There's a lot in the 4 million range, but it's generally around that, around that level that you're probably going to get funding through the Phase 2B awards. It is essentially a second Phase 2 award and supports follow-on research and development. And also importantly, there are fewer participating institutes at the NIH in the Phase 2B awards. The specific requirement that you need to meet is that you have to have received an SBIR or STTR Phase 2 award to be eligible to apply for a Phase 2B award, right? And using one Phase 2 award, you can only apply for one Phase 2B award as well. As mentioned, the actual budget limit is 30 million, but it varies, by institute, and generally considerably less. The other piece of information that is very critical to a phase 2B application and that you want to, think about is that the small business has to be able to demonstrate 100% matching funds for a phase 2B award. So if you were to ask for a $4 million budget, then you need to show that you can raise $4 million on your own as well to match the budget that you apply for the phase 2B. This is meant to be new private capital or new other funding outside of SBIR or STTR. And the new is tripping up a lot of people, I can tell you for sure. And we are in the process of confirming what the new means, whether there is a time frame, retrospective time frame at which you might be able to consider it as part of your matching funds. If you raised it in the last year, whatever the case might be, right? These solicitations are pretty new, and we are still gathering some information on those. The period of performance for most of these phase 2Bs is not to exceed 4 years. Again, the foreign collaboration and sub awards, as was the case with the omnibus, are not allowed. The other kind of grant that you can get from NIH that is along the lines of an SBIR is the Commercialization Readiness Pilot, or the CRP as they are called. These tend to support work that requires considerable outsourcing of effort from the small business to CROs or CDMOs, as the case might be. If significant amount of research and development work is still required, the phase 2B might be more appropriate as a grant. But CRPs are generally there to provide that technical assistance to get the product moving towards the market quicker. With the CRPs as well, just like the phase 2Bs, you need to have received either a phase 2 or a phase 2B award within the last 36 months, and you can apply for one CRP per phase 2 or phase 2B award. So if you have a phase 2 award, then you can apply for a CRP using that. And then if you get in a phase 2B later, then you can apply for another CRP using that. The budget limits for the CRP is about $4.2 million. But again, just like the case with everything else, they vary considerably by the institute. So please make sure you read the solicitation to find out the exact budget limits. There are no cost sharing required here, and there's no requirement for matching funds either as part of the CRP. Period of performance generally not to exceed 3 years. Again, foreign collaborations and sub awards are not allowed as part of CRPs as well. Even though you're allowed to outsource a lot of the work, the small business still needs to be to perform a substantive amount of work when it comes to the planning of the research, the designing of the experiments and studies, and the strategy behind the grant itself. I also wanted to quickly highlight a new NIH funding opportunity that just dropped in the last day or so. And this opportunity is specifically geared for healthcare AI innovators, right? So NIH is launching this program called the PriMed AI program, so which is precision medicine with AI integrating imaging with multimodal data. So essentially, this program is meant to support the development of innovative, reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable multimodal AI-based clinical decision support tools, right? And so this is happening through the Office of Strategic Coordination. It is open to academic institutions, to nonprofits, to for profits, small businesses, etc. So it's open to pretty much everybody who wants to apply for it. There are a few different mechanisms that are available under this particular program. There's UO1s, UG3s, and I've linked all of the different solicitations here. We are still, like I said, it just dropped yesterday, so we are still in the process of going over this and kind of understanding it better. The multiple mechanisms are meant to help with varying degrees of levels of effort and work that might be proposed through the proposal itself that you're putting towards the NIH. Obviously, the budgets are going to vary based on the mechanism, and the period of performance is also going to vary based on the mechanism. It can be anywhere from $300,000 in total cost and budget to all the way up to, in the UG3, UH3, I think you can, ask for up to $2 million per year in direct cost. So there is considerable amount of money here. Again, if you are considering a proposal for any of these solicitations and you would like our help, I would, absolutely encourage every single one of you to come in and talk to us. We are more than happy to work with you. And, as Sam mentioned, through the SME process, we, make sure you're aligned to some of these solicitations before we even encourage that you work with us and we write a grant together. The last one that I just quickly wanted to touch upon as well. I don't know, Sam, did you have something to mention?
Nope. I was just getting ready
Okay.
for whenever you're done.
Yes. Last couple of slides here on my side. Just wanted to also touch upon the NSF SBIR STTR program as well. So the NSF has announced their program. For most of you, if you are on the healthcare side of things, NIH might be the more attractive option because there's more institutes, more likelihood that you're going to fit under the priorities of that institute. But if you have a technology that is a high risk technology or is in the cutting edge of innovation, and is a high risk, high reward kind of proposal, then the NSF might actually be the right, avenue for your application, right? Because they are looking for proposals that improve quality of life, but they also contribute to, our nation's economy and security, right? With the NSF, SBIR, STTR, it's not limited to healthcare projects. There's a wide variety of areas that fit within what the NSF will actually fund, right? The first deadline, NSF works on a rolling deadline. So the first deadline is going to be July 27, 2026. And there is recurring deadlines from there on the first Wednesday in November, the first Thursday in March, and the first Wednesday in July. Through the NSF, the scopes that are available for you to apply, the phase one, the phase two, and fast track. But in the case of NSF, it is a phase development process. So, which means that if you have not received an NSF phase one in the past, you cannot apply for an NSF phase two, right? So, you have to go through the NSF phase one program before you can apply for an NSF phase two. And to get a fast track application in, there is a specific NSF lineage that you need to have, which means they have gotten a research NSF grant prior before you can apply for that fast track grant. But once you have your foot in the door and you're able to apply for the phase one and the phase two, there is supplemental funding available through the NSF, through the phase 2B program, the strategic breakthrough, and other mechanisms as well. NSF has, just like how the readiness tool that we talked about earlier, NSF also has a project fit assessment tool. It's a yes or no question tool. So it really isn't, I personally don't think it's very helpful, but again, it's something that you can use. If not, go to the grant engine readiness tool and make sure, to use that as well. All right. For the phase one proposal at the NSF, unlike at the NIH where you can just apply for it, at the NSF you do need to apply for put in a project pitch, which is essentially a one-page document, a couple of pages document, I mean, which talks about the technological innovation, the market, the competition, the team, the approach that you're going to take. You submit that, they will invite you based on whether you fit their priorities or not. If you are invited, then you get to put in a phase one proposal. The invites are valid only for the next two submission deadlines. So if you miss the next two submission deadlines, then you will have to go through that project process all over again. Per company, you're only allowed to submit two project pitches per year. So you want to be strategic about what you're trying to get funded through the NSF. Phase twos, as I mentioned, need a phase one award to be submitted, and it needs to be submitted within 6 to 24 months of the start of a phase one grant. Fast track, as I also mentioned earlier, requires NSF lineage, I-Core training. There are some, specific pre-requirements that are, that need to be fulfilled if you're going to be applying for a fast track. The success at the NSF is based off of three broad criteria, which includes the intellectual merit, broader impacts, and commercial potential. And the reason that they are, like I said, they're interested in funding high risk, high reward projects, and they're so very focused on the market. And so there is a lot more information as part of your phase one grant that will be required in terms of your competition, your market that you're trying to apply for. So there's some pros and cons about whether you apply under an NSF SBIR or an NIH SBIR. And again, these are things that we can help you navigate as you talk to us, and we get you, the best strategy forward in terms of non-dilutive funding. And that is my part of it. And over to you, Sam. You're on mute.
Sorry. There's Matt, there's two questions that are remaining that I haven't gotten in it time to answer. So if you can pick up those on the chat, that'd be great. Um, okay, if we could jump, yeah, the next slide and advance one more, please, sir. So we promised a little bit about how to write to win, and you saw the trend line earlier. It's getting more competitive, and we expect that trend to continue because AI does not know how to write a winning grant, but it knows how to put words on a page. And for that reason, we expect volume to continue to climb and win rates, just more noise in study section. How do you win? The first thing you want to do, I'm on the right, so it's going to get more competitive on the left. On the right, the first thing you want to do is have curb appeal or make it appealing to the reviewer to want to crack open and actually read your detail. Not unlike buying a house, you want to have the pictures look great and the headline text look great so that the too long didn't read bumper sticker at the top pyramid of communication is right and tight. And that requires synthesis of what is that single short sentence that delivers how and why your project deserves to be funded. Then at level two of your pyramid of communication, you want a simple and throughout messaging of what your project is doing, why it's innovative, why it is better than the standard of care, and why your project deserves to and stands head and shoulders above other programs that are in development. And then at the bottom level of communication, you want to have the rigor of a logical chain of experiments that build on your existing data and support it by reestablishing and reaffirming the data that exists previously, develop more rigor, and advance with new experiments, progression in a logical way towards the milestones of your project. That is how you write the approach section, which is always the toughest place to win and which is where you lose most often. We recommend getting external help. We have an offering that is grantsmanship and external review, where you write the grant and we're just adding key value. So that's a place for us to go. And we recommend a risk-based approach. So look at your grant, find out what are the riskiest or the weakest parts, and fix those first. The readiness tool that we have in the chat is a great way to do that. Certainly, engaging with us is you'll get that tangible feedback, and then keep after that by reducing the weakest parts to make them strengths, and do that until you have an all-around winner. On the next slide, there's some data. So that's really how to win. This next slide speaks to the data around winners and losers on, Matt, if we could advance the slide, please. The green bar is the winner. So these scores are low score wins like golf. Green bar for each approach, each criteria is the winners. The blue bar is the losers. And you can see there's some overlap in significance, investigators, some spread between innovation and environment. But look at the approach section in yellow. The spread there is significant. And the approach section, they all matter. Okay, but if you had to pick one section, then if you just nailed it and did really well, it would be the approach section. That also happens to be the hardest section to do well. Everyone's working on important programs and everyone can at least articulate why they're innovative. but focus on your approach section. The next slide talks about an overall strategy at um, the company level, which is you want to expand the volume and diversify your sources of funding. Go after state, nonprofits, global sources. We've got tools there of how to evaluate programs. We've got a tool of how to help you raise equity as well. The second bullet, this is the third time I've mentioned it, and it's probably three times too few, which is quality submissions matter. That matters more than volume. You do want to have volume, but you do not want to have volume at the sacrifice of quality. Quality comes first. When you submit quality submissions, stay after it. Be persistent. Grand Engine is very proud that 44% of the time when we win on the first submission. But that means that a majority of the wins that we get happen because we're persistent. So be persistent. There's some accounting issues you need to be aware of around the payment management system and justifying invoices. Um, and as Matt have touched on, tighter scrutiny on foreign risk assessment. Um, if we go one slide ahead, each of these are strategies for how to get longitudinal funding. They are on our website. Madam, if we could jump to slide 27 for a hot second. Um, the if you hover on our homepage, one more, please. If you hover on our webpage under resources, this mega menu will show up. Each of those strategies if you look at win in the middle under customer funding models, you can click on each of these strategies to unpack what those are and how they work. If we could go back to slide 24 of next steps with Grand Engine. Um, the best path for you to work with us is to have a meeting with us, give us a product funding strategy questionnaire, and that we do under an NDA. We will then schedule a subject matter expert review call with you. Um, that equals a we need about 3 days to prepare for that meeting. That's a 60 to 90-minute meeting to talk about how to shape your proposal specifically, where we should go get funding, how we can help you win, how you can win on your own. But that's a really useful call. We give you feedback and thoughts, and that content is very useful no matter what. That also allows, so it's competitiveness, readiness, and really gets us into a good working rhythm so we can continue to be successful. As this slide mentions, we certainly do obviously life sciences. That's where our origins are. We also do defense tech and space and infrastructure and other areas. So that's what we wanted to share. We're at halftime on the match, and it's still 1-0 Congo. We've gotten a host of other questions. Um, Unfortunately, I have got to jump onto a call to help negotiate one of our clients a large ARPA H award. So if you can, yeah, thank you, Dan. If you can, for those of you still on, please answer this poll question, and we will be back in touch. We'll keep it open for another minute or two. Um, and we will, for questions that we were not able to answer, I think, Matt, have you got them all though, didn't you? Yeah, it looks like you did.
Yeah, pretty much. I think there was one question
Amazing.
about state and global and non-profit funding sources. Again,
Yep.
we keep, a sort of Rolodex of a lot of these sources. And so, again, if you work with us, you have access to it for sure. Otherwise, to find it, it requires navigating a lot of different websites and trying to find what is the right source of funding for you.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And we can do that on an SME call. We do have an offering of a solicitation search. We charge $1,000 for that. But if you reference this webinar that you participated in and that we at Grand Engine are willing to do that at no cost for you because you're part of this webinar, tell that to Zach or your SME or your product funding executive, and that will happen for you. All right. Um, Thanks for filling out. We've got one or two. Let's leave it open. Really appreciate everyone. Dow, great to see you. Karen, Denise, Natasha, Aslan, everyone, appreciate your joining. We're going to keep the poll open for another um, 30 seconds, and then we'll wrap up. Again, just we'll distribute the recording and the slides for you to click on, and appreciate everyone joining. We're here for you to help you improve the standard of care to save more lives and make a difference in our world. So thanks for being a part of the great ecosystem, and we look forward to being in touch. Thanks again. Yep, Dimitri, you'll get it in an email, the recording and the slides. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And I'm a UK citizen as well as US, so go England. They got to catch up. All the best, guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye.